Howdy, everybody. This is Omar, your audio amigo, back with another episode of the High Roller Hunt. It's the second in my series of 3 episodes that I'm going to be doing back to back to back. This time we're looking at Letshuoer's Flagship IEM. Meet the Cadenza 12, their top-tier hybrid IEM priced at $2,000 US, featuring a titanium chassis, a luxurious unboxing experience, and a reference tuning. Is the Cadenza 12 the only high-dollar set you could ever need? Well, let's find out. As usual, a quick disclaimer, this unit is on loan from ThaSlaya, who has organized a review tour for this unit. Because I didn't pay for this, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Huge thank you to ThaSlaya for loaning me this set. Link to his content down in the description. He does good work. And thank you to all of you watching for your continued support. The unboxing experience here on the Cadenza 12 definitely does not disappoint. Once you crack open this fun reflective box, you are greeted with this huge leather-clad gift box. It has a nice magnetic closure on it. Inside this box, you will find this set of accessories here. So get the nice Letshuoer paper right on top. You get a envelope featuring cards with the details of the IEMs, warranty paperwork, and the whole 9 yards there. And then underneath, the IEMs are sitting here on this tray. In here is a collective decorative copper plate that is featured here. I don't have this with me here on the tour unit. You can see the case here. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then underneath the IEMs, you find a set of dividers, because once you pull the foam out, you can use those dividers to use this lovely padded box here for storage, and these dividers fit neatly in the box and help you store things. Underneath those dividers are the ear tips. As you can see, you have vocal focused ear tips, you have bass ear tips, and you have balanced ear tips. Those bass ear tips are foam, as you can see there. I'm not going to use any of these because this is a tour unit. You can see everything fits nice and neatly in that box there. It is a wonderfully luxurious unboxing experience. In addition to all of that stuff, put it back the way I found it, the case is actually really, really nice. It's one of my new favorite cases that I've seen on an IEM. It's extraordinarily crush resistant because, as you can see, this is leather-clad metal. Not only does it make an extremely satisfying noise when you close it, kind of like the thump of closing the door on a Rolls Royce, but the branding is really nice. The leather feels great. Super soft on the inside to not scratch up those titanium shells. A little mesh pocket there. This thing works fantastic. Inside that are also the modular connectors for the cable. You get 4.4, and Qtelix users rejoice. You also get the tiny little 2.5 millimeter balance plug. Honestly, this entire packaging is fantastic. I love everything about it. I really wish Letshuoer had partnered with a premium ear tip brand like ASLA or Spinfit to give us a premium ear tip option, but honestly, the stock selection of ear tips is great and functional. Premium ear tips would have been nice, but overall for $2,000, the unboxing feels fancy. In stark contrast to the extremely luxurious unboxing experience is the stock cable. This thing is awful. I hate it, and personally speaking, I used it for maybe an hour when I got these, and then I immediately swapped it for another cable because I just could not stand to use this thing for 1 minute more. It is awful. The bottom half is this cloth-wrapped thing, and I swear it was wrapped way too tightly at the factory or something. It is horrendously memory prone. It is an absolute pain in the rear end to actually use. It is stiff. It is recalcitrant. It does not want to wrap. It does not want to behave. It is just horrible. The amp connection, as you can see, is my preferred screw-on modular termination. It's not as sleek as some of the newer ones I've seen, but I do like the subtle Letshuoer branding on the connector. That's laser-etched knurling. It's not actual knurling. It doesn't provide any grip, which is a bit of a shame. The Y-split is also just sort of featureless metal, and the chin slider works very well thanks to the rubber coating on the top half of the cable. This is still stiff. You can see it has a kink in it that I haven't been able to work out, and you saw when I flipped it over how it immediately flipped up. The ear hooks at least are comfortable, even if that angle is a bit sharp. You can always take a hair dryer to it to fix that. I do like the fact that the plastic is color-coded, like Letshuoer tends to do on a lot of their cables. Yeah, this cable honestly feels like a mistake, and I would say if you're going to get yourself a Cadenza 12, have a replacement cable in mind, because this one, as far as I'm concerned, is a non-starter. Make it go away. The build on the IEMs themselves, in stark contrast to the cable, is absolutely stellar. As I mentioned earlier, these are full machined titanium shells that have been polished to a mirror finish. Matches the box quite nicely, actually. The nozzles, as you can see, are full metal and feature the standard mesh to protect from moisture or debris. One thing that I will say is you can see there's a very slight lip there on the nozzle. That is not enough to keep my Spinfit W1 ear tips on this IEM, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. In terms of ventilation, you can see there's no real vents on the inside here and nothing really else on the outside. The only vent is here underneath this Phillips head screw on the top of the IEM there. I'm happy to report that I experienced no driver flex or pressure buildup issues with these, which is a good thing. Outside of that vent, there are no other acoustic structures or features on this IEM. I love metal shells. They just feel extremely solid. The titanium here is really nice. The Cadenza 12 here is no exception. If I had one criticism on the build here, it's that it doesn't feel super special. It's just sort of standard titanium metal shells. For $2,000, I kind of wanted a bit more panache, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Time to pull up the specs on the Cadenza 12 here. As the name implies, there are 12 drivers tucked inside those shells. There is a 10mm Kevlar dome dynamic driver with a liquid silicone surround, and you have 7 Sony BAs and 4 Knowles BAs. I don't have any model numbers or how they're crossed over, I just know that they're all there. They're all stitched together by a 6-way crossover with 5 acoustic tubes for what they claim is coherent, well-integrated sound. The driver combo is surprisingly easy to power, with these running out of basically anything I threw at them. The sound does change a bit with impedance adapters, and in my opinion, in a negative way, so try to keep your output impedance low, but again, if you're buying this kind of IEM, you probably have a fantastic source already. The nozzles here are right at 6.15mm in diameter, and that mini lip, which doesn't work super well for me, but again, we'll talk about that in a minute. The weight is very controlled at under 10 grams a side, the lightweight titanium doing its job there. Honestly, the specifications really aren't too crazy. It's just that 11 branded BAs that really stands out here, which is always pretty interesting when you see a driver count that high. But now we bring up the cool wall, and the Cadenza 12 definitely isn't going for standout, excitable, or super interesting looks, that's for sure. This is a very subdued, classy, straight, shiny metal aesthetic that really doesn't have a whole lot going on. I think that some laser etching or maybe some CNC pattern cut into the faceplates would have been nice. Maybe have a splash of color somewhere on here. Just anything to draw the eye would have worked wonders on this set. As it sits, I'm going to be placing the Cadenza 12 in bland because I don't really think it does anything to stand out in a good way or in a bad way, so bland it is. These do look pretty sleek though, so let's see what the Council of Ladies has to say about the Cadenza 12. We're not off to a great start. Only lady number 3 is willing to straight up call these pretty. The rest all lean negative with 3 votes for not pretty. That's honestly a pretty big ouch. Interestingly, rather than a 4-1 verdict against comments or compliments, we have a 3-2, one of those rare instances where a meh converts to a yes. However, looking at their thoughts, I think things are honestly pretty clear. Totally understand the fingerprint magnet comment. It's a common thing for most IEMs with this metal finish. There are concerns for the longevity of the surface finish. I will tell you, I don't know how many hands it has been through. This is a tour set. I only saw like 2, maybe 3 scratches on the whole thing, so it's holding up pretty well. Generally, not a lot of super positive thoughts here, but then again, these are a very plain Jane design, so it doesn't surprise me there isn't a ton to say about them. In terms of shape and sort of comfort, the Cadenza 12 have opted for a semi-custom shape. You have a prominent comfort wing there on the end, a valley in between it and the nozzle, and a pronounced bulge here on the side to help it sit in your ear more comfortably. As I mentioned earlier, the only real comfort issue I experienced were the lip here not being prominent enough to hold my Spinfit W1 tips on the nozzle. They did get left behind in my ears several times during testing. I ended up solving that problem by just hitting it with a new pair of W1s. My testing tips have been used a lot. The bore's kind of worn out, so makes sense. I'm not going to knock it too many points for that. Because outside of that issue, the Cadenza 12 were extremely comfortable in my ears. They slotted in nicely, the weight wasn't an issue, and I had zero problems with them over like long listening sessions. My wife, however, didn't really get along with these. She gave them a score of laughably bad. The weight, which in my ears wasn't a big deal, was really heavy for her, and the larger size of these shells meant that she was only able to keep a seal with these for a handful of seconds before it inevitably failed. It's a real shame, but it seems like a lot of these more expensive IEMs tend to go for larger than normal shells, and it just doesn't seem to be working for her as well. But now let's get into how the Cadenza 12 sounds, starting off as always with the bass. The bass here on the Cadenza 12 follows the trend I've seen from recent Letshuoer releases like the DX1 and the DS2. It doesn't come across as boomy or boosted, but it's very controlled with excellent texture and honestly pretty decent rumble as well. This is again one of those sets that seems to do what the track asks of it. Low, for example, will absolutely rumble and bounce when it needs to. It just does it in a more civilized way. Think club with monocles. Mid bass is also fantastic with the bass guitar and kick drum in One Night in Bangkok. It really gives the song the funky heartbeat that it deserves. The impact of those low instruments is really great. The buzzy texture of the strings at the start of the second verse sounds fantastic. Overall, I would say the bass on the Cadenza 12 is excellently resolved, not really boosted or super excitable in any way, but still appropriate for what you're listening to on it. The clean resolving bass leads to clean resolving mids, and thankfully Letshuoer hasn't made the lower mids completely lean and thin here by cutting them back to the point of being lifeless. Yes's roundabout has all the warmth that I'm looking for. The organ, the guitars, the vocals, they all have their space to shine. This track can get rather busy in moments, especially towards the end, but the Cadenza 12, I feel, does a fantastic job keeping every instrument coherent and clear in the mix with absolutely zero masking or any other tonal foibles. Female vocals aren't super forward, but they aren't also pushed back. They just sound kind of natural and roughly in line with the rest of the mix. Kylie Minogue in I Can't Get You Out of My Head sounds like she's supposed to. Her vocals are clear, crisp, tonally unbothered by anything really. She's not nasal, husked over, airy, overly thin, pushed back, drowned out. She just cuts through the bass and instruments like she's supposed to. She sounds fantastic playing off the echoes, reverb, and her backing vocals. And overall, I would say that the mid-range here, as I've come to expect from these more, studio-style Letshuoer sets, superbly executed and really, really nice. And you know what? The superbly executed train is going to continue rolling into the upper mids and treble. Female vocal harmonics and instrument harmonics are just very natural sounding here on the Cadenza 12. The higher sustained notes that Maria Takeuchi hits in Plastic Love don't come across as sibilant or annoying, but they also don't sound hollow, flat, or thin. There's a little bit of sizzle in there, and it's just the right amount to add dimension and depth to her vocals. The treble is a very similar story. It has excellent extension, so the airiness it has is felt, but not fatiguing or overblown. The harmonics thrown off by the cymbals in Duke Ellington's version of In a Sentimental Mood are beautifully sparkly with nice persistent wash and correct sounding decay. They aren't piercing or fatiguing, but they have nice incision. It's a really good balance that's been struck here. I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but the Cadenza 12 just sounds right. Nothing in the treble feels out of place or overblown or underblown. There's a little subtle coloration here and there. I think it will be very palatable for most people. Technical performance is honestly where the Cadenza 12 really shines in my opinion. The way that this is tuned just makes it so easy to notice little details and retrieve small things that you might not have noticed before. I've used the live version of Roy Clark's Malagueña before because the way that the 12-string Ovation guitar sounds is very special. This is a plastic, round-backed guitar with 12 strings that resonate off of each other, and it just throws off a ton of over and undertones in this performance, and the Cadenza 12 doesn't even bat an eyelash trying to resolve them. Everything that I typically notice in this track when I'm looking for details is all there. Don't have to turn up the volume. It's just easy. It's a similar story in my Waltz for Debbie test. All of the glassware hits, all of the moments I expect to hear from the barware clinking against each other is all there. The background conversation isn't super forward like it can be in some sets, but that's kind of how it's mastered. I only really notice it on warmer tuned sets. It's very well balanced, and it's there, but it doesn't distract from the track like it can in some warmer tuned sets. This is some of the best technical performance I've ever heard in an IEM, but it's not what I would say a massive, huge, enormous leap over something like the AFUL Cantor, for example. Diminishing returns are a thing, but I still think this is easily one of the best technical IEMs I've heard. Soundstage and stereo separation on the Cadenza 12 is also solid. Rush's YYZ, for example, sounds about as stereo and separated as it gets. The bells at the start that move from ear to ear, the different instruments mixed in each ear, they all sound how I expect them to. They're nice and wide. There isn't any impression that the Cadenza 12 is crushing or making the sound more intimate than it should. Perceived 3D Soundstage, as I mentioned, is also very solid. Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity has some nice forward and back positional data with the tambourines and the drums, and JK's vocals seem to layer over everything else quite nicely. The imaging is very solid. You can easily tell where the bass, piano, and drum kit are in the space, and while it isn't the most amazing soundstage I've heard at this price, it is easily a cut above average compared to the other IEMs I've heard, and it meets my expectations at this price point. Before we jump into the comparison, let's talk about the effects of impedance adapters or higher output impedance on the Cadenza 12. As I pull up the graph, we can see that the Cadenza 12 doesn't really change too much until you get to the upper mids and treble. Starting at around 2 kHz, you can see an attenuation that goes all the way to the end of the graph. Basically, the Cadenza 12 loses treble with higher impedance sources or when you're using an impedance adapter. I personally think that hurts the overall technical chops and treble extension. It's one of the hallmarks of this set, so reducing it is kind of going against message here. But if you're treble sensitive and the Cadenza 12 is bothering you a bit or it's giving you stealth fatigue over longer sessions, maybe try a cable with impedance built in or get yourself a nice impedance adapter and see if it helps in the long term. The Cadenza 12 then, I feel it aligns very well with Letshuoer's other studio-focused entries, and it works very well as a sort of thesis statement for that line of products. It's the kind of tuning that people buying at this price range might not necessarily love. It's a very standard, warm-leaning neutral signature. It has a bit of an emphasis on bass and a tiny bit of emphasis on treble. It's a mild coloration that I think is fantastic all over the range with lots of genres, and I can see people complaining that it might be too boring or stale. This sort of plain water tuning people seem to have a dislike for, and I kind of get it. You want your high dollar set to have some exotic tuning. But honestly, this set does a lot of things very, very well. I've brought in some sets to compare, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and start with the Cadenza 12's baby sister, the, in my opinion, criminally underrated Cadenza 4, priced at $250 US. This will be getting a full review at some point, just because I think it's one of the more slept-on IEMs at this price point. Main difference you'll hear between these two is the Cadenza 4 basically is tilted brighter than its big sister. It's leaner and cleaner in the bass and lower mids, and it's packing more sparkle and shine in the upper mids and treble. The 12 is airier, it's more technical, it's warmer, it's a bit more mid-centric as a result. It has that richer, weightier sound in the lower mids, and honestly, to me, it feels like a fully upgraded, more mature version of the Cadenza 4. The Cadenza 4 is still a great IEM, but the 12 is clearly in a different league, and the price, I think, reflects that. But now I'm going to bring in what I think is probably going to be a contentious pick. It's the AFUL Cantor, priced at $800 US. Now, the Cantor, its nozzle, and the intended tuning are sort of poster childs for the effects of insertion depth and length mode on sound. If you can get the intended fit on the Cantor, the sound is absolutely incredible and it matches the graph that I have pulled up here. If you can't get the intended fit, however, the Cantor very quickly becomes harsh, aggressive, fatiguing, and bitey. I could describe the Cadenza 12 as a Cantor with better bass texture, a bit more excitement to some female vocals and instruments, but overall these two are tuned very similar. The Cantor does have more bass presence, and it does sound very nice, but there's only so much that those acoustic mazes can do to make two BAs sound similar to a DD. The DD here is fantastic, and even if it's not a complete slaughter like dynamic driver versus balanced armature bass usually is, it's still a win for the Cadenza 12. The Cantor is a bit more V-shaped overall. It has a bit more energy in the treble than the Cadenza 12, and as I mentioned, the bass here can be a little bit meatier, even if it isn't as textured. If you can fit the Cantor properly, I think it honestly gets pretty darn close to the Cadenza 12, even if it doesn't exactly match it. However, If you're one of the many, many people that cannot fit the Cantor properly, then the Cadenza 12 is honestly massively superior. Finally, we come to an older set, but one that I think holds up extremely well to the present day. Still my current daily driver, the Letshuoer EJ07M X HBB Kinda Lava Edition, seen here in my custom resin form. The Letshuoer DNA flows very similarly through these two IEMs. The Kind of Lava, to me, sounds a bit more V-shaped than the Cadenza. It's rumblier in the bass. It honestly matches the texture and quality of the Cadenza 12 in terms of bass to me. It sounds a bit rumblier, as I said, a bit more satisfying here, but it's not in a massive way. This also has a bit more emphasis on female vocals that I think is kind of nice, but those two things come at the cost of the mid-range. It's not as pure and clear as it can be here on the Cadenza 12, and listening to these side by side, the Kind of Lava came off a little bit recessed in the mids. If you're sensitive to upper treble, the Kind of Lava and its more relaxed upper treble signature is definitely the safer set to listen to. The Cadenza 12, again, is easily going to win in the technical and detail areas. It just has the advantage in that airiness and that overall resolution, even if it's not packing the ESTs that this has. So, wrapping up the tuning, to me, it's no surprise the Cadenza 12 is the technical champ here. It's honestly completely expected. It's over 5 times the cost of the second most expensive set here. But unlike some of the other sets I reviewed in the High Roller Hunt, you can get a taste of this sort of tuning for less. The Cadenza 4 will get you ish close, not really. It is brighter and leaner overall, but you can definitely tell that the Letshuoer DNA is here. It's sort of tuned in the spirit of its big sister. Closest matched for me, tuning-wise, is honestly the Cantor. That comes with the enormous asterisk that you actually managed to mount this properly in your ears, and your ear canals behave in the way that AFUL intended when the Cantor was designed. Big asterisk. If you're lucky, great, you sound fantastic. If not, this is going to be super harsh for you. Finally, my trusty EJ07. It's a bit more dynamic sounding, a bit warmer, a bit more colored than the Cadenza 12. It's not necessarily a studio tuned set, but you can definitely tell that the Letshuoer DNA is with these two as well. It's less airy, less technical, less analytical than the Cadenza 12. Overall, as I said, I think the Cadenza 12 works really, really well as a sort of final step on this Letshuoer sort of studio-tuned ladder. It does the job of a flagship very, very well. But now let's go ahead and bring up the High Roller Hunt rating scale. The Cadenza 12 is an interesting case in that its basic tonal balance isn't exactly unique. The Omnium and the Psyche, to an extent, had fairly unique tunings. The Omnium was going for a hi-fi-man style tune with the big dip in the upper mids, and the Psyche is a very different version of Moondrop's VSDF that we hadn't really seen before. The Cadenza, then, can't stand out on its tuning, so it has to stand out with its performance, its accessories, and its build. And honestly, on all those fronts, I think it does rather well. The titanium shells are a little bit boring, but they are nice and hefty, and they feel premium in the hands. The unboxing experience is full-on luxury, and outside of the stock cable being absolute garbage, the Cadenza 12 absolutely nails the kilobuck IEM presentation and aesthetic. The technical performance, it has that in absolute spades. The treble is gorgeously executed with great extension, the bass is tight and accurate, the mids are clean and unbothered, and the whole IEM just sounds right. Is it excitable? No. Is it the most dynamic thing in the world? Also no. Is it clean and boring? I personally don't think so. It has a little bit of coloration to it. I think it works for basically everything. It might not be the most excitable set in the world, but there were a lot of times when I was listening to this set and I just looked over at my wife and I went, man, this just sounds so good. It was a really awesome time having this in the house. I said this tuning gets a lot of hate for being boring, but I think that this tuning is like great cooking. You take a simple recipe, you take the absolute best care, and you pay the most attention to each ingredient and each step in the process, and your end result is going to be something fantastic. And I think that's what the Cadenza 12 is. I'm going to be putting this in the I want this bracket. Letshuoer did extremely good with this set. While it's not my absolute priority to have one of these because I have sort of other sets that fill this role in my collection currently, it's on my list for sure if I want this sort of top tier, beautifully executed tuning and top tier technical performance. Since the Cadenza 12 is more of a generalist set compared to the other two IEMs I've reviewed in this series, its recommendation will come across more broadly than the others. Basically, if you're looking for a clean, well-built premium IEM with a warm-leaning neutral tuning that has great but not excessive bass and a well-extended but not fatiguing treble, then the Cadenza 12 is one of the best options I have heard at this price range. Now, that's not a lot of experience, but from the audio shows I've been to, I know that IEMs in this price range tend to go for more unique, oddball, or sort of exotic tunings. And this doesn't do that. This takes a classic tuning and goes for a full-on, warm neutral tonality and executes it basically about as flawlessly and perfectly as I think I could imagine. And it doesn't have the need for crutches like extended nozzles or DSP correction. In my opinion, this is a seriously amazing all-rounder if you're shopping at this price point. And that's going to do it for the Cadenza 12, the warmish, neutral-ish superstar IEM with a price tag that matches its performance. Massive shout out to ThaSlaya for organizing this tour. Again, please go check him out in the description below. Next up, we've got the final of the 3 High Roller Hunt sets. It's also the most affordable one that we've done on the High Roller Hunt. It's finally time to check out an IEM from the boys up in Oregon. It's the Campfire Audio Alien Brain, so stay tuned for that one. It's pretty interesting. For now, though, thank you all so much for watching and for all your continued support. Massive shout out to the Compadres Club members. There's a lot more of you than I ever thought. Thank you all so much for your support. $5 a month, you get a say in the direction of this channel by choosing what I review with my membership money, the ultimate goal of becoming more independent from samples and companies refusing to send me stuff. But as always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews. I will catch y'all next time.